tropic gum and groundnuts. In 1885, Great Britain, France, Belgium, and Germany all signed the Berlin Act to divide African lands amongst themselves. The objective of this Berlin Act was to also neutralize the African zone in case of a war. However, as a result of imperialism and colonialism, Africa suffered from long-term effects such as the loss of natural resources such as gold and rubber, economic devastation, cultural confusion, geopolitical division, and political subjugation. Europeans often referred to this as the white man's burden because of their belief of civilizing the African people. In 1890, France took up a large portion of West Africa. The hold that France had over its colonies began to fall apart during World War II, when various parts of their empire were occupied by foreign powers. There were the Japanese in Indochina, the Brits in Syria, Lebanon, and Madagascar, Americans and Brits in Morocco and Algeria, and Germans and Italians in Tunisia. After the end of World War II, the colonized people of West Africa were not satisfied with the way France treated them. The West Africans participated in the Second World War, but were exploited by the French. Charles de Gaulle's rise to power in 1958 led to the replacement of the former colonial empire as the French Union and the independence of Algeria in 1962. Only Guinea refused by referendum to take part to the new colonial organization. Majority of the French colonies were given independence in 1960 following the local referendums. However, some colonies chose to be a part of France under the statuses of overseas department.
During the post-war period, Vincent Auriol was named President of France. Under Auriol's rule, he attempted to maintain peace among the political factions within the country and sought to ease the relations between France and its allies. However, this proved to be a failure when a war of repression was declared in Madagascar. René Coty came after Auriol. Coty led France steadily, charming his citizens with his charisma and integrity, creating a new atmosphere for the French to breathe in, and countering the bitterness of the majority of the political parties. It was under Coty that the war between Algeria and France worsened and reached its peak in 1958. Because of the National Assembly's negligence towards Coty's resolution of respecting civil power, he then resigned and declared Charles de Gaulle the new leader of France, who eventually ended the French-Algerian War with a string of events following the independence of majority of the colonies in the 1960s. There were former presidents such as Georges Pompidou, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, and Francis Mitterrand, who sought to maintain French power and relations with its former and current colonies. It was former President Jacques Chirac that refused to discuss the existence of the French military base in Africa. Despite the requests made by the Ministry of Defense and the Quai d'Orsay, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, French military troops remained in Gabon and Côte d'Ivoire. Chirac felt the need of the military to stay within Africa since France had numerous businesses there, such as oil and metal industries. Under President Nicolas Sarkozy, he proposed several projects for the economic boost and good business relationship between France.
In the 13th legislature, the French overseas departments and territories are represented by 22 deputies by the French National Assembly, making up 3.8% of the deputies in the National Assembly. These 22 deputies all reside in Réunion, Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guiana, French Polynesia, New Caledonia, Mayotte, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, Wallis and Futuna, Saint Barthélemy and Saint Martin. French overseas departments and territories have been represented by 19 of France's 343 senators since September of 2008, accounting for 5.5% of the total number of French Senate. There are representative senators in Guadeloupe, Réunion, French Guiana, French Polynesia, Martinique, Mayotte, New Caledonia, Saint Barthélemy, Saint Martin, Saint Pierre, and Miquelon, and Wallis and Futuna.
France left NATO's military command in 1966 when the then-President Charles de Gaulle withdrew the French forces protesting against what he saw as ever-growing US dominance within the organization. So why did France leave the military command? Well, General de Gaulle felt that NATO was dominated by United States and Britain, and he wanted France, while remaining a member of NATO, to have greater independence. Little by little, he withdrew France's forces from NATO's command, starting with its Mediterranean fleet in 1959. In 1966, all French forces were removed from the integrated command and all foreign forces told to leave France. Since NATO's military headquarters were near Paris, these had to be moved to Belgium. So after 43 years, why does France want to get back in the NATO? Well, President Sarkozy is far more sympathetic to the United States than many of his predecessors, and feels in the post-Soviet era that France no longer needs to display its independence in this way. He argues that in fact, France is losing out by not being in the command structure. It takes part in NATO military operations anyway, and it even have deployed its forces in Afghanistan. So what difference will this decision make? Not a great deal in practice. France is already committed under the NATO treaty to joint action if member is attacked, and it is taking part in NATO's war against the Taliban in Afghanistan. However, the move has considerable political, diplomatic, and symbolic importance as it signals an end to an era of French separation. It ends the anomaly of the country contributing to the fourth largest number of troops, being outside the command structure. So, does France have a price for this decision? Well, France wants some senior commands to be filled by French officers, but beyond that, it wants the United States to accept the idea of a European defense policy. Such a policy is allowed for in the European Union's Maastricht Treaty of 1992, which laid down that the European Union should develop policies that might, in time, lead to a common defense.
With an allocated budget of 42.52 billion euros, $62.7 billion, the French Armed Forces has the third largest expenditure of the military in the world, only behind the United States and Russia. It is also the largest military force in the European Union, with 259,000 regular personnel and 419,000 reserves. The French armed forces are responsible for the defense of the state and its overseas territories. President Sarkozy has pledged a mutual defense agreement with some of its former colonies. It has since deployed 9,000 troops around Africa, in Senegal, Gabon, Djibouti, Ivory Coast. It has about 300 active nuclear warheads in its arsenal, making it the third largest nuclear force in the world. Russia being the first with 4,650 active, and the United States second with 2,468 active. On a statement made by former President Jacques Chirac, he said that France will not hesitate to retaliate with nuclear weapons if France is to be attacked. After France rejoined NATO in 2009, it was made clear by President Sarkozy that the nuclear arsenal of France will be kept solely under French command, and the only authority to call for a nuclear strike is the President of France. According to the presidential advisor of Gabon, the French protect our system against internal and external threats. In exchange, we support their policies in Africa and elsewhere. Although the French is willing